Welcome, but I really should be saying konnichiwa instead of welcome, because by the time you watch this, I'm going to be in Japan. So by the time I get back, hopefully a few more words of Japanese. Now, as you may recollect, we said that the first edition of every month would be a Q&A. So we've selected 3 of the more interesting, challenging, deep, insightful type questions for me to answer. Now, my apologies if I'm not using your correct name, because we don't necessarily know your name, we just know what comes up on YouTube, okay? So I'm going to do my very best to read it out, but if it isn't your name, sorry, up front. If you want me to use your right name, well, use your right name on YouTube. So the first one is Vivian Toe, or Vivian 2, I'm not quite too sure which. But anyway, definitely Vivian. So the question is this, and it's a great question, well done Vivian. Will HMO strategy work in cities in the south and the west where house prices are a lot higher? Great question. So let's just make sure everybody's in the same place first, make sure everybody understands what an HMO strategy is. HMO is, or used to be, or potentially still is, a regular house or a flat. And it's had some modifications such that individual rooms are let out, typically by the week, instead of by the property by the month. So up here in Doncaster, and that's I think why Vivian's asking the question, up here in Doncaster, we can buy a, 3-bed terrace or a 3-bed semi or something like that. We can comfortably still do it from £100,000 and have change. We'll then spend another £30,000, £40,000 on it to convert it into, say, a 5-bed HMO. I think Vivian's asking the question because you can't go and buy a house in St Albans or wherever, Exeter necessarily, for £100,000 that you can then turn into a 5-bed HMO. But just stay with me and just for a second, just let me explain the Doncaster numbers. So the property that we might buy for, say, £100,000 in Doncaster as a family let, as in one family or a group of people rent it for the month, might be £550, £600, maybe £700 a month in a really nice area of town. But that same property, once you've spent the money on it, you've turned it to 5 bedrooms with 5 en suites, well, suddenly you're £100 per room per week. And if you multiply that up by the average number of weeks in a month, the same property that would only give you £600, £700 as a single let, you're getting more than £2,000 as an HMO. And that's a really attractive strategy. So, do HMOs work in more expensive areas? The short answer to that is yes. And here's the key to unlock that particular door. HMOs can be valued either on investment yield, which is what we tend to do up here. So how much money are they generating? Then take off a factor for the deductions that you need to make for voids and electric and gas, and all the other things. And typically a lender would say around about 70% of the gross is net, which is fine. But what that's going to do is it's going to lead to an investment yield that's smaller than the bricks and mortar value of the property. So here's what you can do in more expensive areas. Rather than do a yield-based valuation, you can do a bricks and mortar-based valuation. But the very fact that it's now an HMO means it's more valuable because it's not any longer a simple house. So it could be a £500,000–600,000 house that you buy, convert it into an HMO, but the yield is never going to, the investment yield is never going to carry an investment yield-based mortgage, but there still will on bricks and mortar. So do things like we do up here. Buy a property, and then using permitted development, put an extension on the back. You can go half the width of the property up to 6 metres deep. And if it's a semi, the way the rules are written, you can put an extension on the whole width of the property, 6 metres deep, using permitted development. So add value to the property. Do something to add extra rooms. Make it physically bigger. Convert the garage. So use other strategies. So there are just different, it's not that they will or won't work. It will work. Property works everywhere. But depending on your local market conditions, you need to adapt and adopt those models to suit your area. So fantastic question, Vivian. Well done. Love it. So if property prices are a lot higher, how else could you do it? Well, how about shops and uppers? How about you buy a shop with 3 or 4 flats above it? And how about you go and see how cheap that is, even in an expensive area, because I did one of these in Bristol recently. Look at buying, I think it was a newsagent on the ground floor, and then it had what was going to become a 7-bed HMO above it. It wasn't one of mine, it was one of our students, but I helped them with it. And the purchase price for the commercial property, the shop and uppers, by the time you'd separated them out, put the shop on one title, put the HMO on another title, or what became the HMO on another title, that was a no money in deal. Or sorry, it was an all money out deal. It was money in, but it was all money out. So I hope that's useful, Vivian. And I'm going to move on to the next question. Oh, before I do, Vivian, it does. And in our group, in the Touchstone family, we've got many people doing HMOs in the most expensive city in the UK and one of the most expensive cities in Europe, London. So there is no reason why this can't work. Okay, next, we have got Barry Page. And Barry is asking the question, what's the most tax efficient way to pay yourself via an LLP, a limited company setup? I love it. Now, to give you a proper answer to this question would probably take me half a day, or a full answer to this question. So here we go, Barry, here's the highlights. Now, the way we operate is we have limited liability partnerships that own assets, and then we have limited company that manage and operate the assets for the property owning company. So this is called an OPCO, operating company. This is called a PropCo, property company. And between the two, we've got agreements that specify how much money moves from which entity to which entity. This limited company is governed by corporation tax and all the rules that govern limited companies. The LLP is governed by a completely different set of rules. And essentially, the difference is this. This is corporation tax, this is personal tax. So how can you tax efficiently take money out of a limited company? Well, the first £12,500 a year of income is obviously tax-free. And then dividend income is extremely tax efficient too. The first £2,000 is nothing. The next £30,000 is 7.5%. So you could pull out, say, 12.5 as a salary, 2 as dividend, tax-free, another 33, say, as dividend at 7.5%. So now you're approaching £50,000, and on like half of that, you're paying no tax at all, and on the other half, you're paying 7%. So it's a really, really tax-efficient way to pull it out. And don't forget, claim your expenses. Don't forget, you can make pension contributions up to £40,000 a year. Think about this. Your limited company pays you a pension contribution. That's a cost to the limited company, no tax. It goes into your pension fund, let's say it's a SAS. So you've paid no tax. You personally pay no tax. The company pays no tax. That's pretty tax efficient. What you then do is you lend the money to one of your property projects. So the money that's in your SAS is only in your SAS tax-free, because if you hadn't put it into your SAS, you would have paid it as tax, so you would have lost it. So this is extra money you wouldn't have had. Why wouldn't you put it into a SAS instead of wasting it by giving it to the government as tax? Just for you to think about. Now the LLP, how can you get money out of the LLP tax efficiently? Well, you can obviously do a salary if that's what you want to do. You can obviously do pension contributions if that's what you want to do, but you can only do it to the maximum that you can do it for. But in addition, from the LLP, because you've got both now, you've got personal tax and you've got corporation tax, you can use something called capital allowances, which we use a lot. And the fantastic news is, as of this April, every single person in the UK is allowed to earn £1 million a year tax-free if they know what they're doing. And that's using the LLP and capital allowances. So I hope that's a useful short answer, Barry. There's a hell of a lot more to it than that. Okay, the third question, which is also going to be my last question for today because we're running out of time. Sorry about that. You know me, I will talk all day. I've got a world record for public speaking. And that particular one, we talked for 6 days solid. How about that? And my very first slot on that 6 days solid was 8 hours. Well, it was 8 hours. That's what I took. I was supposed to take 6. So I overran by 2 hours on a 6-hour slot. How about that for talking? So next up, we've got Guy. Now, apologies if I pronounce this wrong. I think it's Nzuzo. Okay, Guy Nzuzo. So I hope I've got that roughly right. Guy says, I'm 50. How can I grow my pension pot knowing that my pension provider doesn't allow me to partially transfer it? Okay, now, obviously, you need to take individual detailed pensions advice. So I can give you some general guidelines. How can I grow my pension pot knowing that my pension provider doesn't allow me to partially transfer it? Well, I guess you've got three choices then, Guy. Choice number one, you can leave it where it is. But I would like everybody sitting at home there or wherever you're listening to this to do this exercise. I would like you to just ask yourself these questions. Number one, might sound a bit obvious, have I got a pension? Because more than 50% of you are going to say no. So if you haven't got a pension, what can you do about that? Well, you can get one. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? And Guy's saying, well, he's 50. Well, fine. I don't care what age you are. You can start a pension pot at nearly any age. Why nearly? Well, legally, you've got to be 16 or you can't have one. So you've got to be 16 or more, and now you can have a pension pot. So choice one, have you got one or not? If you haven't got one, get one. Now ask yourself this question: how much money do I need to live on whenever you want to retire? You might say, well, Paul, I'm not going to retire. Well, maybe you won't have that choice. How do you know when you're not going to be able to work anymore? How do you know that you're not going to have some accident? How do you know that your health won't prevent you? How do you know that something external to you might not cause you to have to stop work? So whatever age you are, I want to ask yourself that question. How much money do I need to live on? And then the next part of that question is, what's my current pension going to provide for me? So more than half of you, the answer's easy, nothing, because you haven't got one. But if you do have a pension, still ask yourself that question. How much do I need to live on? How much money is my pension going to provide? And if the amount of money you need to live on is more than what your pension is going to provide, here's the next question. What are you going to do about it? And that effectively is what Guy is asking me, which is why I said there's three choices. So Guy, here's the answer to your question. Number one, you could start an additional pension fund. So a SIP or a SAS, a self-invested personal pension, SIPP, or a SAS, small self-administered scheme. The SIP is for one person, the SAS is for up to 11 people. You can do that at any age, as long as you're 16 or more. So you could start an additional one. Now the next part of your question, or the next inference I'm drawing from the way you've asked the question, is your pension provider won't allow you to partially transfer it. Well, they never will. It's called a transfer value for a reason. You either transfer it or you don't. You can't transfer a bit of it. So here's your two choices, and they're really, really simple. So choice number one, as already covered, start an additional pension fund. Choice number two, leave it where it is. Choice number three, move it. But your question is, how can I grow my pension pot? So if you want to take control, if you want to take action, if you want to be responsible for your own destiny, you need to take control. So how can you take control? Well, you can either take control by starting an additional new scheme or transferring the whole lot. Now, if this is all new to you, and especially if you don't know anything about commercial property, please go and get yourself some education and some support. But I'm just telling you what you can do, Guy. But let me give you an example of a property that I found very, very recently, because I set myself this challenge twice a week. Find a commercial property that is a good return on investment. So I found a shop on a brand new 10-year FRI lease, full repair and insurance lease, which means you, the landlord, are responsible for nothing. The purchase price on that shop was £115,000. Now I didn't negotiate it because I haven't bought it. I just found it as an example. And the lease, the rent coming to you, the landlord, on that shop for the next 10 years is £15,000 a year. So could you put 115k into your pension fund, buy a shop with it, and then enjoy £15,000 a year for the next 10 years? Absolutely. What happens in 10 years' time? I don't know. Maybe that shop is going to extend, maybe it's not. But why do you care? Because you've already had £150,000 off it, and now you've got a free building. So maybe you let it to the same people. Maybe you let it to a different person. Maybe you turn it into a coffee shop. Maybe you turn it into flats. I don't know. But what I do know is the alternative, if you don't do any of that, is called an annuity. And if you go and buy an annuity with the same £115,000, you're probably going to get 3%. So 3% of 100,000 is £3,000. 3% of 15 is 450 quid. So you're going to get £3,450. Now wait for it. That's not per month, that's per year. That's not even £300 a month. And whenever you die, because we're all going to do it one day, that annuity, that pension dies with you. Well, not if you've turned it into shops and offices and factories. So I hope that answers your question, Guy. And my main, strongest advice to you will be get the proper education, the proper support and the proper advice. So I hope you've all enjoyed this week's edition of Money Matters, because money does matter. And if you'd like your question to be featured on a future edition of Money Matters, well, just pop it below, put the question in, and we'll select the most interesting, the most challenging, get my little brain cells working. So I'm currently, as I said, in the land of the rising sun. So I hope you enjoy whatever it is you're doing until I'm back again. Please make sure to tune in to Money Matters every week. And ask yourself always the question. Because ultimately, the quality of the questions we ask determines the quality of our life. So the correct question for anything to do with money is always this: how do I get handsomely paid for doing what I love doing? I love traveling. So how can I get handsomely paid to go traveling? How can I design my life such that I can get paid from any part of the world at any point in time doing what I love doing? Just leave you with that thought. You've been wonderful. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.